Hey everybody, it's Holly. Today I am back with Chris Shelton. If you haven't seen part one of this discussion, I will put the link to it in the description below, as well as a link to his channel. Like I said before, amazing content and a ton of it. Today we're going to pick up where we left off and go through the TRs, or what's called Scientology's Training Routines. This is something you do in the communications course, if I'm not wrong, as well as another course for some higher level TRs. So
Yeah, there's various levels of the TRs. In other words, they don't try to kill you right away with them. They build it up slowly, and there is a sort of a lesser. The TRs are training routines, right, or training regimens. They're drills that you do, that you practice, and there's lots of different kinds of TRs. There's the kind we'll talk about with communication and control. And there are other TRs as well that people use in Scientology to do administrative training and training around control and commands and getting your intention across and that sort of thing, as well as these more regular TRs that everybody talks about all the time.
all right, cool. So say we just jump right in. Training drills remodernized from the 16th of August 71.
Yes. The TRs were first invented in 1956, 57 time period. They were first announced publicly in the Freedom Congress, I think it was, where Hubbard was demonstrating them. And there were two sort of sets of them. There's TRs 0 to 4, and then TRs 6 through 9. Each drill is numbered, right? So you have a TR 0, and you have a TR 1, and a TR 2, and each of them are separate drills. And TR 0 through 4 have to do with communication. So those are the most talked about, most referred to TRs in Scientology. Generally speaking, when people talk about the TRs in general, they're talking about 0 to 4. But you also have the upper indoctrination TRs, which are TRs 6 through 9. And those have to do with teaching a person how to control another person and alternatively be controlled as well. And those are your two sets of TRs that are most commonly talked about or referred to. In terms of what they are, Hubbard was trying to, or ostensibly was trying to solve certain problems in the 1950s. The e-meter was not in use for a period of time, and Dianetics and Scientology auditing were kind of haphazard. They were sort of all over the place. And it wasn't the formalized procedure that it is now, where you have a set room and the checklist, all the things that we went over last time, where we went through all those sort of rigorous steps and procedures and the form of auditing. In the 1950s, it was much more loosey-goosey. And so auditors were just kind of doing whatever the hell they wanted, as long as they were giving the commands and trying to push PCs through and doing those. The way out is the way through. What turns it on will turn it off. Those were very, very much being applied, but without an e-meter, or sometimes the meter was being used, and there wasn't any courses yet on stuff that you could really just go down to your local Church of Scientology and do an e-meter course. That didn't exist in the 1950s, and so it was very, like I said, kind of loosey-goosey. The TRs were Hubbard's first effort at trying to formalize or put in place a form or structure to how the auditor related to the pre-clear. And this is how people bought into doing these TRs and spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of their life practicing these skills. And he sold it as, well, look, you guys are auditing people, but you don't give the command when the guy needs it, or you change it. You change the wording of the commands I'm giving you. I tell you, give the pre-clear these words in this sequence, and you do something else. And then you wonder why it doesn't work, right? And this is Hubbard bitching and moaning at the auditors about why they weren't doing it right. So the TRs come in, and Hubbard says, look, you guys are not communicating well and properly, and I'm gonna teach you how to do it better. And so we're gonna sit you down, and we're gonna teach you how to just kind of sit there and quietly, not make a fuss and just listen to the person in front of you for hours at a time, because auditing sessions go for hours. Most auditing sessions are not short. Most of them are quite long. And auditors would fidget and get up and walk out in the middle of the session, go take a cigarette break, stuff like this. I mean, auditors were it was very informal. It's not, this is not licensed therapy. This is just roll your own counseling, right? So Hubbard goes, okay, well, we're going to put these standards in place, and that's what these TRs are going to be about. And so first, we're going to teach you to just sit in a chair for hours at a time, so you can just do it and listen to the person in front of you. And then we're going to teach you how to listen to anything that's being said to you. Bull bait is what it's called, right? This particular form of TR0 is it's now divided up into 3 different drills. So there's OT TR0, TR0, and TR0 bull bait. And each of them is designed to try to get you to just kind of sit there and just not move around or do anything. But the bull bait part is where you are being given, where you're sitting there practicing just sitting there, and somebody is insulting you flat out, or trying to find your buttons or push your buttons or stuff like that.
This is essentially where you become a robot.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You got to become a wooden Indian type of thing, right? Even though Hubbard says you shouldn't become a wooden Indian, that's what you end up having to do, because you have to suppress your emotional reactions, humorous reactions, your triggers, etc. And by doing that, you sort of have to the word in psychology, and it's a controversial thing in the ex-Scientology world, what's happening to a person when they're doing these drills. But I feel that I am on pretty stable, safe ground when I start throwing words around like disassociate. Technically, disassociation and dissociate are 2 different things, but they're used the same way often enough. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. But this idea of separating yourself from who you are, your identity, like viewing yourself from outside your head, sort of objectively contemplating your existence, and
going exterior.
Yeah, going exterior, this kind of thing, right? This is facilitated by, this has helped, this kind of state of this trancy sort of out of your head, out of your life, separated from yourself kind of feeling. Is not necessarily good for you over a long period of time. And it can mess with you in a number of ways. It can mess with your memory. It can mess with your sense of identity. It can mess with your psychological triggers, trauma, past trauma, as far as your relation to that, or how you react to that trauma. It can have some really weird, interesting kind of effects. And so, but it's a bit of a variable thing. It's sort of, everybody's a little different with this. But generally speaking, you sit somebody down in a chair and you demand that they sit there motionless, quiet, not moving, not twitching, not doing anything for hours at a time. And you're going to get some extremely weird reactions. Physical, psychological reactions I'm talking about. Really weird. People are going to get incredibly uncomfortable, moving around, falling asleep, passing out. I mean, all kinds of stuff happens. And in fact, there is an issue where Hubbard describes this, talks about this stuff from 1971, called The World Begins with TR0, which we looked up just before the show.
Yep. Basically talking about how people weren't doing TRs properly.
Right. This is 1971 now, so we fast forward from when they were invented in the 50s and put into practice. And Hubbard really slammed these things home. This was something that Hubbard found to be, there was a lot of stuff Hubbard introduced in the 50s that came and went. It appeared, it looked like it was going to be a thing for a little while, and then it gets abandoned and they move on. But the TRs were something that stuck. Hubbard really liked what these TRs did to people. And I believe it was because of this dissociation factor. Because it's just another way, like with Dianetic auditing or Scientology repetitive auditing, or the exteriorization auditing, it's another way, without even having to do an auditing session, to get you into a trance state, to get you into a disassociated state, and to mess with you psychologically. That's what I believe Hubbard liked about the TRs, even though that's not how he talked about them. He talked about them and their benefits and how useful they were and what a discipline it was and how good it was. And he sold it so well to so many people that even coming out of Scientology, ex-Scientologists will talk about these TRs and talk about the communications classes with a smile on their face, with happiness, with like, yeah, that was something that really helped me. That was good for me. I enjoyed that. It was useful for me. It improved my communication skills. And I was actually one of those people for quite a while. It took me a long time to try to start breaking apart and figuring out what those TRs were actually doing and whether they were really of substantial help to me or not in my ability to communicate with other people and be present, you know.
How far after you left did you start realizing this may be a problem?
It was a few years. It was a few years. I gave it a lot of thought, but it really required some education on my part. If you buy into Hubbard's bullshit on this stuff, then you could sell TRs like I sort of described in the beginning here, as this really as a good skill set to have, right? To be able to sit in a chair and relate with somebody and be present and mindful and not be off contemplating your navel while they're talking to you and stuff like that. Generally speaking, that sounds like good stuff. But like I said, there's these other factors. And these are not obvious factors. These are not things that slap you upside the face. The physiological reactions that occur during TRs certainly do. They are incredibly uncomfortable and can put you into very bizarre states, really. But the cognitive dissonance and the sort of, you know, rationalization of it is, yes, but this is for my own good. No pain, no gain. You know, got to make it through this. This is going to be, you know, I'm going to be such a super being when I get done with this. And the thing is about the TRs is you're never done with them. Ever. You don't do them and then you're done with TRs. TRs are something that auditors and Scientologists, auditors especially, you know, if you get into that part of Scientology where you're auditing other people, then TRs are going to be a daily thing for you. But even with public Scientologists, you do them over and over and over again in various classes. There's classwork you do where these come up, and it's not just on the communications class. For example, the PTSSP course, where you're taught how to deal with suppressive people, has a full round of TRs. There was a class for a while that had a sort of interim level TRs called the therapeutic TRs course, where as part of your grade chart actions going up the bridge being audited, you stop and you get told you got to go do some TRs. And off you go to do that as part of your processing. You know, it might even be that your auditor has to get you through them. Or they send you into the classroom and you do this, you know, little class on it. I don't think that's still offered. I think they replaced that with something else now, some other equivalent. So I might have the name of the course wrong, but that action of sending you off to go do TRs it's something no Scientologist will be able to permanently avoid. Eventually, you're going to do these drills as a Scientologist, whether you do them as an entry-level Scientologist with the communications course or get introduced to them later when you're in the big classroom, the academy, the major services area. You know, you're gonna end up doing them, and you're gonna end up doing them over and over again. And like I said, when you get into auditor training, that's when they really start getting enforced. And when you do the classwork, and that covers the TRs as a sort of round of drills you do. But when you get onto your auditor internships, where you're auditing on a daily basis under the inspection of a more senior auditor, that's called your internship. You do TRs every single day. Every morning you're doing TRs. So these are a common thing in Scientology. It's not a one and done with this. For most Scientologists, that's how it is.
Yeah, I thought originally that it was going to be a one and done thing. I had no idea that they kept going throughout your entirety of bridge movement.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring that up because it's not obvious, right? It's not clear. And if you just look at the materials, you might think, oh, you just do them on these classes. No, 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 no.
Wow.
And the world begins with TR0 emphasizes, certain things about TRs. In fact, Hubbard describes this way of doing the TRs called TRs the hard way. TRs for blood. TR, we're gonna do it the hard way, right? And this became in 1971. The TRs got sort of reintroduced into the Scientology world with a sledgehammer. It's like, you guys have not been doing these drills right, and I'm gonna set you all straight. So there was kind of a what's the word? Rehabilitation, like a re-go of the TRs in 71. There were a few things that happened in 1971 in Scientology, and this was one of them. This was a big one. Because Hubbard wanted wanted everybody doing the TRs, and he wanted them doing them hard, which meant, according to the way he described it, that it's 2 hours. No, okay, you're going to sit in a chair across from another person, staring them in the eyes. You don't look at their nose or their mouth or their chest or their shoulders. You're looking at them in the eyes, and they're looking at you in the eyes. And you are expected to do this drill for hours and hours and days. Like, you're going to fill up an 8-hour class period, and then you're going to come back the next day and you're going to do it again, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to do it again. Hubbard talked about it taking 50 to 60 hours of classwork, sitting in a chair, staring at each other, until you could pass a 2-hour, no fidget, no blink, no wiggle, no error, no problem, no sneezing, no coughing, no fidgeting, no falling out of your chair, no falling asleep, no psychotic episodes. 2 straight hours, and he recommended taking a chess timer or a cook timer or something, and every time you mess up, you hit that reset button, and it's 2 hours from this point forward.
God,
right?
That's gotta drive people insane.
Well, I did it.
Explain your experience. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so in that issue, in the world begins with TR0, a little bit later on, Hubbard describes some of the phenomena that happen with people, and I wanted you to see that because he himself knows exactly how crazy making this is.
He was a hypnotist.
And he was. And Hubbard was all about thought reform. I mean, we really got to be clear about this, that let's keep in mind the context of what we're talking about. This is not a humanitarian philosopher, as he presented himself. This is a con artist and a pathological liar who got off on controlling people. According to his own private writings, Hubbard was all about dominating other people. That's his own words. I didn't make that up.
Those are the affirmations, right?
That's the affirmations. That's right. So Hubbard, we already know Hubbard's character. We already know what he wanted out of life and from people. He himself tells us in his non-Scientology personal writings that, weren't ever supposed to get exposed, but did. So knowing that, you really shouldn't fall for his nonsense about how positive and helpful and useful the TRs are. See, this framing that I sort of gave was Hubbard's framing of, oh, well, auditors aren't doing their job right, so we're going to provide more form and structure to the communication that they are engaging in the auditing process. But what Hubbard really was doing was putting another level of framework in place to control every aspect of that auditing session. You control the auditor, and the auditor controls the pre-clear, right? So Hubbard's take on auditing, Hubbard's desire for auditing was to get these auditors into a frame of mind using TRs and other indoctrination that they would basically do exactly what he told them to do without question, without flinching, without avoiding, right? Like they would do it with gusto. They would do it with vigor and vim and energy, right?
They'd be happy to do it.
Be happy to do it. Exactly. They'd be happy to abuse the shit out of the pre-clear, out of their patient. And because they have been trained in how to be a good auditor by basically being tortured, right? Because these TRs are a little bit of torture in a way.
A little bit?
And again, it's fully described in that issue I gave you, right? So when I did it, I'll tell you, I had some of the weirdest damn things I've ever had in my life happen to me. I mean, okay, you sit there and you stare at this other person, right? And I was starting to see double and triple and quadruple vision of this person sitting in front of me. And he had to stop me at one point and say, I can't keep doing this drill because what I'm looking at is I didn't know what was happening. He tells me what was happening is this eye here was still looking at him while my right eye would wander off and just kind of go off and do its own thing and then come back. And I was like, that's what's happening? And he said, yes, it's the weirdest damn thing I've ever seen.
Holy crap.
And I was like, no shit, I can't believe I'm doing that. Because I couldn't tell what was happening. All I could see was weird visions, right? And
Hey, you start hallucinating.
You do. You literally start hallucinating. I saw monkeys flying around. I saw colors and spectra and all kinds of weird stuff in my vision. Your focus goes in and out. And even more importantly than the visual hallucination is the mental places you start going. I mean, at first you're just sort of thinking about this or that or the other thing, but then this necessity to be there. Okay, the drill describes that you are supposed to be there comfortably and confront. That's the stress of the drill. The training stress, the thing you're supposed to be working on is just be there comfortably and confront the person in front of you. And by confront, Hubbard means to face up without flinching or avoiding. He defined it very specifically. So when you're confronting another person, it's not in anger or, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. It's not that kind of confront. It's confront as in face up to without avoiding or, not looking them in the eyes and stuff like that. Hubbard was real big on that. And he wanted auditors who would be able to sit there and look at the PC and deal with what the pre-clear was saying and doing. And okay, let's back up a second here because we didn't really talk about this in our last show. But one of the reasons that these TRs were needed, I mentioned that auditing was fairly loosey-goosey. Well, one of the things that could and did happen in auditing all the damn time was people losing their mind. People going into full-blown psychotic episodes because they were being pushed into past traumas that they were not ready to deal with or would overwhelm them through repetition of having to relive the traumatic episode over and over again, which is the Dianetics technique. And so that form of technique or mode of treatment is a bit dicey, and with people who are not, I guess you could say, prepared. You throw them into a trauma and they're not ready to deal with it, and they lose their shit. And so this would happen often in Dianetics and Scientology sessions, and auditors would give up or take off or
start rabbiting.
I mean, here's this person starts jumping up and down, acting like a monkey or something. They're like, holy shit, I wanted to help you, but I didn't expect this. And they don't know what to do. They realize they are dealing with somebody who's in this, who's having a psychotic episode or is in a very, very, very bad way. And they freak out. They'd get up and run out of the room, or they would give up the session, or they would start yelling at the person because the pre-clear starts being insulting or being, is in the middle of their trauma, and they're saying and doing all kinds of stuff. And the auditor's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Take it personally. They lose their shit, etc. So sessions were falling apart, right? And this is, of course, directly due to the fact that Dianetics doesn't work, right? It's not doing what it says it's supposed to do. So it's not like if you do it, it's just a smooth sailing. A lot of Dianetics and Scientology auditing is disastrous. I mean, it has really bad consequences. So Hubbard needed to make his army of auditors willing to put up with that crap and push through it. What way out's the way through? What turns it on will turn it off, right?
Get the PC through it.
So those were the rules. That was the demand: is you get the PC through it, come hell or high water. I don't want to hear it. You're the auditor. You're responsible for the session. You better face up to it, and you better confront it, and you better get the pre-clear through it. Otherwise, Mr. Auditor, you're the one who's falling down on the job. You're not helping that pre-clear. You're screwing the pooch, right? And it was all on the auditors.
It's not because Dianetics sucks. It's because you suck.
Exactly. And they bought it. And that's how they bought into this whole song and dance about how they needed to become this disciplined core of auditors who'd be able to face up to anything, you see. And where this went is Hubbard took these TRs and actually made them into their own thing. TRs went from a way to keep an auditor from rabbiting or running in a session to its own level of control. It's like, oh, you guys don't know how to run a session and not make a pre-clear psychotic. Well, we're gonna sort of remold you into the way I want you to be as an auditor, and that'll get it so that you'll get these pre-clears through, right? And it doesn't make any sense. It's not the right thing to do, but it's what Hubbard did. So he managed to invent a whole nother layer of control with the TRs, you see.
I did not know a good chunk of that. That is insanely informative.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. And I thought that issue would be like sort of the proof positive for you on that, right? Because Hubbard describes in such detail in there how he wants TRs done. And he wants it done the hard way. And he says, in no uncertain terms, in 1971, you guys have been screwing the pooch, right? You guys have not been doing these TRs the way I said you need to do them. Well, why would he be so insistent? Why a 2-hour confront? No fidget, no move, no twitch. Why can't you just learn to sit in a chair for a little while, listen to somebody in front of you, and just be chill about it? Why does it have to be this rigid, militaristic, psycho journey through, the depths of your reactive mind or whatever, right? To go through this and learn how to be an auditor. Well, because of all the reasons I just laid out, because Hubbard needs these auditors to be 100% willing to do whatever the hell he tells them to. Because these auditors are going to be Hubbard's army of abusers, right? They're going to abuse the shit out of their pre-clears every single time they take them in session, as we laid out in the last video, right? All the reasons why, right? So this is one of the many ways, and one of the more powerful ways, that Hubbard convinces auditors to be abusers without realizing that that's what they're doing. You see, it's got it all reframed. So it's, this is how you help yourself. This is how you help your pre-clear. But in fact, this is just another way that Hubbard is abusing people.
And it's, once we actually dive into what these are, you'll see what we mean by that.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we've already covered the fact that you're sitting in a chair staring at somebody for hours on end. I mean, anybody who thinks that's easy or no big deal, yeah, go do it for a while.
The problem I have with it is the term blinkless. That is the main issue. I would think that they'd allow like occasional blinking due to eye dryness. They want total non.
Okay, there's another issue. Years later, there were some notes that were released that Hubbard wrote somewhere, specifically addressing blinkless TR0. And here's the twist that Hubbard will give you is the way he'll mess with you is he'll go, okay, people have been demanding blinkless TR0, 2-hour blinkless TR0, and that's not the and here's how Hubbard, you saw the issue. You see exactly in 1971 what he wrote.
Yes, I do. It's
so
right
here.
He
comes back later, years later, and says, Well, look, some people have been demanding, right, that you do a 2 hour blankless, TR, and this is wrong because what it does is it puts your attention as the auditor on your body and on your eyes rather than on the pre-clear you're supposed to be confronting, and that's bad. So we don't want that. So, blankless TR0, yeah, well, that's not necessarily a requirement in order to do the drill. And then he ends it with, but any truly competent auditor can do it.
Wow. Okay. So I was gonna say, it sounds at first like he's
disavowing, right? Disavows the whole thing.
sounds like he's gaslighting.
That's because that is what he's doing. You see, that's my point, right? Is like he goes, nope, you're off the hook. You don't have to do the blankless TR0.
Unless you want to be a true Scientologist.
But any truly competent auditor can do it. And I have never forgotten that line because a friend of mine and I talked about it when that issue came out. We were like, God damn it, what the hell is this? I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? We were literally like sitting there going, what are we supposed to do with this?
Cognitive dissonance.
I want to be a competent auditor, but it's another little double bind. It's a way to screw with you.
That's fucking
He just
crazy.
kept throwing them in there, constantly, man. It's all throughout. So, that's the thing about the TRs. So the blankless was and is a standard. It's still around. It's still followed. And yeah, it will hurt you. Your body will not deal with that. There is no such thing as a body not blinking for 2 straight hours. I have had Scientologists in the past tell me they did it. I don't believe a single one of them because I don't think your eye can actually deal with that.
Have you ever seen people like get up and blow the course because of this strict requirement? Because it's like, if it's a communications course, you're just getting in, so you're not gonna be at the.
Oh yeah. Now let's be clear. Now on the beginning courses, you are not held to that standard.
Okay, figures.
Now, anymore. Because in the 1970s, they did.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah, they did. And they had people coming in right off the street doing blankless TR0. And sometimes they were being made to do it for 2 hours because of that 1971 issue I gave you, right? Because of that, the world begins with TR0. I mean, look at the title. Hubbard was all about, you guys don't have your TRs in, and because here's the thing, your TRs are not just drills, they become a slanguage in Scientology. It becomes part of the loaded language of Scientology that your TRs are in or they are out. You're either successfully applying and using them or you are not. And if you are, then that means you're, a tough hombre who can deal with people and you can communicate effectively and you hear what people tell you. But most importantly, you can confront.
Yep.
You can deal with anything. And so the TRs became their own level of accomplishment rather than just becoming a drill to help auditors not blow a session, right? It became this other new standard that you had to achieve to be a good Scientologist. If you hadn't done a TR0 for 2 straight hours blankless, you were really a lesser grade Scientologist, see?
Wow.
It's like that in the culture.
Holy crap. So when I looked at TR0 for the first time, the full text of it on the bulletin, my question to you is, what was your major stable win when you first did it?
Just being able to do it, really. I mean, it's kind of what it comes back around to. TRs started being treated, and Hubbard encouraged this with that issue and with other issues that he talked about, the TRs. The TRs became their own kind of auditing action. See, it's not auditing, it's training. So you don't get to have a case in the classroom. You're not supposed to be doing casework. You're not supposed to be, when you're in training, you're supposed to be in the driver's seat. You're supposed to be the guy who's learning things. But these TRs mess with you so hard. I mean, people falling out of their chairs, going unconscious, having psychotic episodes, that it was like an auditing session, because that's what happens to people in auditing sessions too, as we've described. So the TRs started being treated like a case action. And you needed to do the TRs in order to make case gain. But this is another one of those places where Hubbard is just fucking with people 24/7, because he will put out a technical training film, for example, where he says the TRs are not for case gain. You don't do them to flatten something or to deal with your case. You do them for auditing. They're done to develop auditing skill. So then he throws out this bulletin that says, oh no, they're all about case gain, and they give you case gain, and you should do them for case gain. So again, it's this double-bindy, contradictory, weird, like, how am I supposed to even think about these things? Is it a training thing, or is it an auditing thing, or is it a little bit of both, right?
Now, is this the kind of shit that David Miscavige in future releases, edits because he sees these contradictions? Does he edit these out at all just to make Scientologists happy?
Not at all, because it doesn't make Scientologists. These double binds, these sort of contradictions and sort of gaslighting techniques are that is Scientology. That's what it's supposed to be. That's not how it represents itself, of course, but that's what it is. It's a control operation. It's a scam. It's designed to get you the money out of you. So the more insidious, the more twisted the control mechanisms can be. In other words, the less obvious the control is, the easier it is to control you, and the easier it is to get more and more and more money out of you. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. It's about screwing with you so that you will heed Hubbard, do what Hubbard tells you to do without question, and keep giving over your money. So it's in Miscavige's best interest, in other words, to keep this as twisted and screwed up as Hubbard invented it, right? Because this is one of the best control mechanisms Scientology has, because it delivers an apparency that you're communicating better. And it took me many years out of Scientology and dealing with people in a mental health world, in a milieu, right, in a mental health environment, to understand that those TRs really weren't helping me.
I mean, it must have been weird when you were staring people dead on in the eye, not blinking, and talking to them. They were probably like, "What the hell are you doing? Stop!"
Exactly, right. Among other things, there's the physicality of it. There's the sitting there staring at them in the eyes. There's also this incessant need that is trained in and on a drill called TR2. Part of the 0 to 4 series is the TR2, which is about acknowledgments. When somebody says something to you, you learn to acknowledge that communication so that they get that you heard them. Well, most of the time that's fine, but sometimes it is the most inappropriate thing to do. And it just is. You're in the middle of a communication with somebody, they have something they're thinking about, and you keep cutting them off with your acknowledgments. Yes, I got that. Thank you. Good, fine. You don't need to say all that.
Makes it sound like you're trying to end the conversation.
Well, it does. And that's, in fact, the purpose of an acknowledgement, is to end the communication by signaling that you have heard and understood what the person said. But sometimes when you're dealing with people, you need to let them go for quite a while before they're satisfied with themselves that they have answered your question or have said what was on their mind. They're figuring out as they go. And if you keep sitting there, hitting them with acknowledgments, you're going to mess up their train of thought. You're going to be cutting it off all the time. I did this, right? This happened to me as well. And I watched this on both ends, and I was like, wow, these acknowledgments are not really as cracked up as I thought they were in Scientology, where everybody's kind of in on this thing where acknowledgments are supposed to happen. And because you expect it, it's not necessarily always as jarring as it is in the real world where people are not trained in Hubbard's techniques, and these techniques don't really work that well, and they do get in the way of good communication because you're trying to follow this formula rather than just be mindful and present with the person you're talking to.
Because I was gonna say, when you're doing those acknowledgments, it sounds like it's just a control mechanism to teach you to shut up and stop whatever it is you're doing. So once you speak a certain amount of time, you're automatically expecting an acknowledgement, so you end off right there yourself. You kind of police your own speech.
That can happen. That can happen. Absolutely, that happens. And it's a push pull thing, right? Because again, it's not like acknowledgments are always inappropriate. Often they are. It's the right thing to do, but not always. And that's the trick with this stuff. Is Hubbard offers these as universal rules of conduct for communication. You always X, you always Y, you always Z, right? And it's not always true that you should X, Y, or Z. Sometimes there are exceptions to these rules. Hubbard never allows for any of that. His idea of how auditing is supposed to work, how communication is supposed to work, how people are supposed to work, it's very what's the word? Automaton. It's very it's very mechanical. That's the word. And this was kind of the thinking. We can also look to the fact that the culture that Hubbard and Scientology came out of was also in this frame of mind, right? Where science and where technology and where machines and computers, 1950s computers were just kind of becoming into the public awareness, were seen as the ultimate expression of order and workability and functionality, right? And so the brain was being analogized to a computer or to a machine, which it's not. It's an organic thing. It's very different than a machine. But we didn't know that in 1950. And so this is another reason people bought into this whole rhetoric of automaton mechanical functionality is what's going to solve all my problems. And Hubbard posits, for example, communication, the communication formula. He says all communication between life units of any kind follows a rote formula. Well, it doesn't. But Hubbard insisted it did, right? And so the TRs are built around this communication formula that Hubbard came up with. Whether it's his invention or not is unclear, but he did push it very, very hard. And Scientologists, almost to a T, even after they leave Scientology, tend to think that the COM formula, the communication formula, is one of the most brilliant things in Scientology. And it takes a lot of work to break it down and start realizing that's not really how it works at all. So that's one of the things that's really hard to get across to ex-Scientologists, because that this is the stuff that they hold on to tightest, is some of the wins and gains they get from the communications work.
Now, what is this communications formula?
Cause, distance, effect, right? Cause originates a communication. It goes across a distance of some kind to a terminal or a receiver, and that person is effect. So I am causing a communication right now. I'm talking, and I am causing this communication to go across this electronic medium to you right now. And that is cause, distance, effect. And there are other elements added to this formula. That's the basic formula, is cause, distance, effect, with intention, attention, duplication, and understanding. And there are a bunch of other elements you can throw into it as well, but that's the basic formula, is cause, distance, effect with intention, attention, duplication, and understanding. You are supposed to duplicate what I am saying on your end, and thereby, through that duplication process, come to an understanding of what I have communicated to you. And that would be an ideal communication. And then it reverses in a two-way communication, and you become cause, and I am effect, and you originate back to me. And if we go back and forth and keep it in balance, that in Scientology is considered an ideal communication cycle, is what it's called.
Okay, so that's another cycle then.
That's
I
right. The communication cycle.
God,
That's right.
can't
Cause
imagine how many I
disrespect.
haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
All right, so we covered OT confronting, which is sitting there, but this one is closing your eyes.
Yep. OTTR0 is sitting there across from another person 3 feet apart, but you're not even looking at him. Because Hubbard came across OTTR0 in 1971. That's when it was invented. Because TR0 was all about staring at somebody with your eyes open, right? But people were falling out of their chairs. They were falling asleep. They were going psychotic. They were having all these problems. So Hubbard said, okay, let's cut it back and let's have a whole drill before you get into the eye open part. You're just going to sit in a chair and you're just going to learn how to be there comfortably. And you're not even going to be looking at anything. You're going to close your eyes, but don't fall asleep. I can't tell you how many snoring. I mean, how many times I had people snoring in the classroom because of OTTR0, man. All the damn time. So, yes, no falling asleep on OTTR0 was basically an excuse to fall asleep. I did more OTTR0 and fell asleep. I can't even begin to tell you. Anyway, so that's the first drill. Yes, eyes closed. And you don't have to do that for 2 straight hours, but generally people do OTTR0 for quite a while as a preparatory thing to then opening their eyes and going for the 2-hour blinkless deal.
All right, my question about it is, what is confronting using vias?
Oh, vias. Yeah, vias. Vias. Okay. Okay, Hubbard said that one of the things that this is where it gets into the mind fuckery. And believe me, there is a lot of mind fuckery going on with TR0. Because it becomes a kind of Buddhist mindfulness meditation exercise without saying that's what it is. And that's not a good thing. I mean, by this I mean Scientologists will take these words of confronting without a via, and they will understand that to be that they can develop mental mechanisms that are vias, that they're using this mechanism between themselves and the thing they are confronting. Like, for example, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to keep my back very straight. And I'm going to feel the straightness of my back as I sit here in this chair. And that is how I will keep my attention focused on this person in front of me, is I will have my attention on my back.
Got it. So it sounds like a way to stay awake, essentially, and stay
Exactly.
focused.
Exactly. Or I will keep a stiff shoulder set, or I will look him right in the eye, but every 2 minutes I will look over here and then I'll look over there at that eye, and then I'll go over to this eye and I'll look at that eye. These are all vias, according to L. Ron Hubbard. They're mechanisms that you use, or ways of avoiding, is how he phrases it. Ways of avoiding your confronting, right? You're not really confronting. You're confronting with a via.
But
And
our brains are constantly requiring stimulation. We feel like we have to do something in order to keep going.
Exactly. See, I'm so glad you just said that, because that's exactly where I wanted to go with this is our brains require stimulation. We do not do well in quiet, motionless spaces. I don't know if anybody noticed, but it tends to make us a little nuts. You put somebody in solitary confinement, for example, and you leave them there for days on end, and you are going to have a crazy person at the end of that. It is cruel and unusual punishment. It really shouldn't be. Solitary confinement is crazy making. Now, there's all kinds of other things you can talk about with solitary, but the point is what you said, the brain requires stimulation. And when you're sitting in a chair, quiet, with no stimulation, because the room is pretty quiet, there's not a lot happening. I mean, a TR course room tends to be kind of, with everybody doing TR0, everything is real quiet. And even if there is noise in the classroom, you're not necessarily supposed to be paying attention to it. You're supposed to be in some kind of Buddhist Zen state where you're just sitting there quietly, comfortably being there, confronting, right? Be there comfortably and confront. Well, what the hell does that mean? I cannot tell you how many hours I spent with students clearing up the word be in a dictionary. What does the word be mean? Well, it really just means exist. It's really all it means. But people would run all over the place mentally trying to figure out, what does it mean for me to be there comfortably? Well, it really just means exactly what it says. But how do you do that when your brain requires stimulation? Well, they can't. And that's where all these vias come in. But then Hubbard lays down with a branding iron. Nope, no vias. No vias. And this is where the mind fuckery comes from, because you start trying to figure out, and I spent weeks, months, years trying to figure out, what the hell am I actually supposed to be doing? In other words, am I doing the drill wrong? If I'm sitting here confronting you and I'm thinking about my taxes, am I being there comfortably confronting, or am I doing something else? See? And you start thought policing yourself. And that is when it gets nuts, because you cannot stop yourself from thinking thoughts. But you try. And that's where it goes nuts. I mean, really crazy making stuff. Because there's things you cannot do. You can't stop existing. I mean, until you go, until you die. You don't stop existing. You can't stop thinking. Your body can't stop processing things. Your body is a biochemical machine. It is operating 24/7. And so is this. It never shuts down. It never stops. And it's got layers and layers and layers of activity. And it's presenting you with ideas, plans, schemes, right? All the time. That's what the brain does. Your consciousness is a part of that process. It's not all of it. And so when you're fixated on doing nothing, you are doing something that is impossible. You can't not do things, right? You can't not think things. And that's another level of the crazy making that can occur on these drills, is you're trying to do the impossible and you're setting yourself up for nothing but failure, but you can't fail. And so what do you have to do to resolve this? Somehow you have to twist reality around to make it make sense that you indeed are being there comfortably confronting, even though you aren't doing what you think you're supposed to be doing. And it just goes on and on ad infinitum. And people get really, 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 really upset and really, really, really confused about this stuff. I supervised people on TRs for years. I didn't just do them, I supervised them. And so I just ran into endless amounts of confusion with this stuff.
All right. So that is OT confronting, and we went through confronting the pre-clear, not blinking, all that stuff. Bull bait.
Yeah. Okay. So
insulting.
Insults, triggering, pushing your buttons. The idea is that you are sitting now across from somebody who is now talking to you. They're not sitting there staring at you in the eyes while you're staring at them in the eyes. Their job as the coach now becomes to throw you off, to get you to stop confronting, to stop being there comfortably confronting. Because when you're just staring at somebody else and they're not doing anything, and that's not, there's no challenge from that end. It's all internal. The challenge is all inside your own head, getting yourself over all the nonsense you have to get through to do this 2-hour deal. Now we're going to test you on your ability to confront by trying to trigger you or trying to push your buttons. And the coach is supposed to find and tromp those buttons hard, right? No mercy. I mean, this is ultimate Cobra Kai, no mercy. You are absolutely in this person's face and you don't care. And I have watched some of the funniest stand-up you will ever hear was actually sit down. It wasn't stand up, right? It was the coach sitting in a chair, just busting up the person next to them, right? With some of the most amazing insults and personal remarks and stories. I mean, I have watched an entire classroom lose their fucking shit over some funny story, because we would have some coaches who were really good comedians. I mean, they weren't, that wasn't their job. They were just funny people. And oh man, I mean, it was very entertaining sometimes as the supervisor watching this stuff. But sitting there doing the drill, that if it was just about making you laugh, that wouldn't necessarily be what we would call traumatizing. But it's not just about that. You can push any button this person has. And here's where things get a little ugly and weird, is with children, because children are made to do these drills, not just adults. And when it comes to children doing these drills, the same rules apply. You can say anything to them. Now, most Scientologists have some degree of common sense, and they don't want to traumatize children. However, not everybody is like that. And when you get into certain situations, especially in a Sea Org environment, ain't nobody caring about whether they're kids or not. And remember, in Scientology, children are adults in little bodies. That's the attitude about children, is that they are adults and they just have a little body.
Your Thetan is trillions of years old.
That's right.
Has gone through many lifetimes.
That's right. And that is justification for an incredible amount of abuse that happens with children: sexual abuse, psychological abuse, work trafficking. I mean, there's a lot of crap that goes on in Scientology around labor trafficking because of this. So, but that's a whole different topic. As far as this goes, when you have kids doing these drills, you can have an adult bull baiting a kid. You can have a kid bull baiting an adult. I've seen all of it. And it's a little weird having, with that, when it starts approaching real trigger buttons and really weird stuff. So kids can end up getting traumatized by these drills by adults who are thinking they're helping them, but they are not. And of course, the other thing is, not just kids, but anybody doing these drills can be triggered or traumatized. And the idea in Scientology is that you don't have a case when you're in the course room. You don't have a reactive mind. You don't have a right to a bank when you're in the classroom. Well, that's really super fucking convenient for Hubbard.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say, that's one of the stupidest things I've heard, considering the reactive mind is doing work all the time, according to Hubbard.
Exactly. So Hubbard just says, this is how it is, and we just have to act as though. He said he acknowledges it's not true, but says we have to act like that anyway. Again, just more bullshit controls. But this really comes out on bull bait. So you are taught basically on this drill to suppress your emotional responses, to deny that they even exist. Now, there's nothing wrong, you see, with being able to control yourself, keep yourself grounded, I guess you could say, in rough circumstances, right? We all are going to be challenged by life, and we're all going to have circumstances and situations we'd really rather not be in. And if you were to do drills like this in order to sort of up your ability to deal with, trouble or somebody giving you a hard time or, that kind of thing, and you've kind of kept it at that level, okay, great, But with this drill, anything goes. So the coach is enabled to do or say anything to you. And if you react, it's a flunk, and then you have to do it again and again and again and again until you don't react. And if I start bull baiting you about the loss of your mom or some traumatizing episode or incident, I've seen people getting bull baited over getting yelled at. You got to get flat on getting yelled at. Your senior yells at you and you can't deal with it, you're the problem. So we're going to do bull bait until you can deal with getting yelled at. That's not so good for a person. Yelling and screaming at him isn't my point. My point is you're normalizing yelling at people. You're normalizing a cultural environment of abuse with this drill by blaming the victim for not being able to deal with being abused. This is par for the course in Scientology. This is absolutely normal. This is how the abuse gets normalized, is this kind of thing.
Now this brings me to a question. This reminds me of something you would have to go through when you're on staff or in the Sea Org. No case on post.
Yep, that's right. No case in the course room, no case on post. You suppress that shit. And bull bait is one of the ways you learn how to do that. You learn how to suppress your natural responses and emotions to things. And remember, these drills are done over and over and over again in the course of being a Scientologist. It's not a one and done. They come up all the time. And the bull bait comes up all the time, and the TR0 comes up all the time. So this is a repetitive action for Scientologists. And the chances of what I'm explaining here happening are high. I watched it happen over and over again over the years that I taught in classrooms in Scientology. So this is not a one-off experience I'm talking about where once or twice I saw somebody do this. This was all the time. And I'm just giving, just a couple of examples of how abuse is normalized in Scientology using these drills.
Wow. I was going to say, I don't know if it's suitable, but if we pretended that we were sitting 3 feet in front of each other, you think you could demonstrate some of the things that a coach may say to a pre-clear?
Well, I don't really want to. I mean, you could say anything you want. I mean, that's the thing about bull bait is anything goes. So like I said, you could, you could start talking about their sensitivities, their triggers. You could insult them. You can get in their face. You can yell and scream at the person. You can also try to make them laugh. And that's usually what people do. You can poke a person a little bit, but you can't really physically get on them.
I was about to ask that question because of the may say or do anything but leave the chair line. I wasn't sure how much you could handle a person.
Technically, you can, but the soup's probably going to come over and stop you. If the coach grabs you by the shoulders and starts shaking you, God damn it, rah! I've seen that, but generally speaking, I as a supervisor would put a stop to it, because if you consider these drills are about auditing skill and the auditor is supposed to be, learning how to be a better auditor, odds are his pre-clear is not going to reach across the table and start shaking him. You know what I mean? I would stop that with there's another issue in Scientology called coaching. And one of the ways there's 4 points to being a good coach is in doing these drills with the person. And one of them is coaching with reality. You want to set up situations that have some degree of reality to them. So I would only let that kind of thing go so far. But I watched, classrooms where they were just kind of allowed to go do whatever they wanted.
All right. That brings us to TR1, Dear Alice.
Yeah. Okay. So the rest of the drills, let's go through quickly. That's TR1 is basically just taking random quotes out of the book Alice in Wonderland. The coach the student takes lines out of the book and delivers them as though he's saying them to the coach. And the idea is to deliver a communication across to somebody clearly, lucidly, and without variation, without screwing up the line too. You have to make the words your own. So you have to say it as though you're saying it, not reading it as a character in the book. So, they called him, what was it? They called him Tortoise because he taught us, lines like that in the middle of Alice in Wonderland. It's always tea time here. I mean, I've got half that book memorized, I think, because I did this damn drill so many times, or heard it being done, right? Because Alice in Wonderland is used for the statements on TR1 and for the acknowledgments in TR2. And 2.5 for that matter.
Oh, yeah,
anyway, yeah. So you just take random lines out of Alice in Wonderland and read them to somebody else as though you are saying them.
Now, this seems actually reasonable to be in a communications course as compared to everything else we've discussed so far.
Well, exactly. If I was going to try to offer a communications class and I had to use this stuff, I would dump TR0 entirely. I just wouldn't have that be part of it. It's the part that is the most, screwing with your head kind of stuff. Nobody's doing TR1 for 2 hours straight flawless, right? That's not the standard to get through TR1. If I can hear you and you're understandable, you're done. I mean, TR1 generally is over in a few minutes. It's a very easy drill to get through, unless you're dealing with somebody who truly has a speech impediment or speech difficulty or a problem with being able to be heard with volume, and you work the person over until they can speak clearly. So that's where you actually learn a skill that's useful in some fashion, with this course.
All right, so we went through TR2, acknowledgments. Now we're at half-acks, 2.5.
Yeah. Those are the continue, go on. Yes. What were you saying? It's an effort to get the person to continue communicating. Sometimes you have people you're talking to who drag out their communications or have long pauses as they're contemplating or thinking about what they're doing. And you want them to keep going, and you want them to know that you're hearing what they're saying so far. So you give them a, yeah, go on. That kind of a thing. That's a 2.5. Again, this drill takes a couple minutes for people to master. It's not a big deal.
All right. TR3, the duplicative question.
Yeah, this is where things get a little weird again.
Do fish swim and do birds fly?
Right. Okay, so there are a lot of auditing processes Hubbard invented that require the auditor to ask the same question over and over and over again. And I mean hundreds of times in the course of a couple hours of an auditing session. These questions could be, oh gosh, there's just so damn many of them. They're repetitive. Okay, so I mean, some of them are fill in the blank kind of questions. Others are, recall something that was really real to you. It's a command. Recall something that was really real to you. And the guy does, and the auditor goes, great, recall something that was real to you. And he'll keep going for hours, right? Recall something that was really real to you. And the auditor's job is to not mess that up, to not alter it, to not change it. Remember what I said earlier, in the 50s, auditors were just changing commands. I don't like the way this is worded. I'm going to roll my own command. Hubbard was like, no, you're going to use the command I gave you. And so TR3 was developed to enforce this level of compliance, you see. TR3 is more of a compliance-making drill than it is a communication drill, because you are being taught to do something very weird, which is repeat the same question to a person over and over and over again. And for the purposes of the drill, rather than using auditing questions, the questions are, do birds fly or do fish swim? So you'll ask that question, do birds, you choose which one, you don't do both. You don't alternate them. It's the same question. And this one generally takes people quite a while to master because it's a little weird.
Now, I want to just quickly, if we can, jump to repetitive processing.
Yeah.
At what point, again, the pre-clear is at the end of all his ideas for recall or whatever, and now his answers are just, I don't know. When do you end that? I'm assuming floating needle?
Well, yeah, any auditing process is supposed to induce a euphoric experience. That's the whole point of it. And it does so through trance-induction, like we covered, right? So repetitive commands are trance-inducing commands. They put you into a state where, again, remember, your brain needs stimulation, right? But your brain also needs newness, novelty. That's what the amygdala is, one of the things the amygdala is all about. So when things are the same, when they are completely predictable over and over and over again, you fade out. You go into this trance state. This happens in classrooms. This happens in movie theaters. This happens at public speaking events. This happens all the time. We are always going into little trance states. This is not some weird thing that happens to people. It happens all the time. But you can induce it in somebody on purpose, which is what I believe Scientology auditing is doing, and thereby get a person in a dissociative state and more suggestible. And so this kind of processing does that. And it does it uniformly. I mean, it's really, really good at it. what was I going to say? And you've indoctrinated the person into what is supposed to happen, like we covered. So the person knows you're going to keep doing this until they have a euphoric experience, until their needle is floating, right? They have a cognition. Because it's not just having the needle floating, it's four things. It's FN, cog, VGI's release. So the floating needle, a cognition, which is a realization that the person has to express or voice. So it's FN, cog, VGI's, very good indicators. The person has to visibly look better. They can't just sit there and smile. Yeah, I feel better. Nah, that's not good enough. It has to be very good indicators. I feel great. I'm so happy. This is wonderful. Right? That's very good indicators. And a release, which is a subjective state where the mental mass has moved away and you feel like you're no longer socked into the unconsciousness that the trauma or that the trance induction was creating. You see, it puts
You've blown that charge.
Exactly. You blew the charge. Exactly. Right. So that's how it's framed in the Scientology world. But all four of those things have to happen for the auditing process to be completed. And you know that. You learn that right away when you're in an auditing session. So you lead yourself to that end result because you train yourself to do that, because that's the only way you're going to get out of that auditing room. But you also believe that this is for your own good. So you feel that these steps are necessary and important, and you put up with it, and you deal with it, and you roll with it, and you accept it, because this is the standard by which Scientology auditing is delivered and done. And you believe with all your heart that this is what's good for you. And so you endure it because the end justifies the means. See? The end being that euphoria experience. And it feels great. I mean, the dopamine rush and all that, it's legit pleasurable. So, it just so happens that it's also addictive, and it's also completely fake, because that euphoric experience is just a biochemical reaction. It is not indicative of blowing charge, and you are not releasing trauma, and you are not necessarily becoming a better person because you went through a trance induction and came out the other side. But that's how it's all framed. And that's what I believe is going on in auditing. This is still, this is the stuff that needs a lot more research to understand fully what trance and hypnotism, all this stuff. This is very controversial stuff, but this is how I frame what's going on there that makes sense to me and explains the results, the consequences of what auditing does to people. This makes sense to me as to what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pre-clear originations, TR4. Seems very similar to TR3, but with mentions of the pre-clear state.
Correct. Yeah. Here's what happens. This is an attempt to train the auditor to deflect when the pre-clear tries to escape the process. Not everybody cooperates for hours on end with repetitive processing, right? You go in there and you get asked, from where can you communicate to a throat for 3 straight hours? And after a while, you're like, God damn, I get the fuck out of here, right? So sometimes pre-clears will originate stuff on their own bat. They're not just answering the question that you're giving to them or following the command you're giving. They come up with their own stuff, right? I want to leave. I'm hungry. I want to go to the bathroom. I want to leave. I don't want to do this session anymore. I think you're a scumbag. I mean, whatever it is they say. Oh, look out the window at that bird. I mean, they could say anything. It doesn't have to be directed at the auditor or be personal to him. But regardless, get the PC through it. What turns it on will turn it off, right?
The way out is the way through.
The way out is the way through. So TR4 was developed to get the auditor to understand, acknowledge the pre-clear's origination, and get him back on the process. So no matter what the pre-clear is saying or doing, the auditor's sole intention is to shut him up and get him back on the process. because I don't really care, Mr. Preclear, what you have to say or how you feel until you hit that euphoric experience, that EP, that end phenomena, right? The FN cog VGI's release. Until you hit that, I really don't care what you have to say. I'm going to understand it, I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to get you back on the process. So this drill trains the auditor in being an automaton as a counselor, right? As a counselor. I use that in very loose terms there, right? Big, huge air quotes on that.
You just reminded me of a quick question that I had about last time and intensives and all that stuff. If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So Preclear's got 2 hours on his intensive left. He's in the session for the full 2 hours, and can he go over once that 2 hours passes?
Yeah, the auditor's job is to get the pre-clear to the end result of the process, and if that requires going over hours, the auditor has two options: get the pre-clear to a flat point where he's not necessarily fully done with the process, but he's at a good spot. You know, they reach a lull of some kind. Okay, we're going to wrap up for the day. Maybe his needle's floating a little bit, but it's not the end of the process. There's still more gain possible, so to speak, right? So the auditor's conscious and conscientious of the auditing time and the hours involved, but he's also responsible for the pre-clear having a good result and getting to the examiner with a floating needle. In other words, after an auditing session, the auditor has a meter and does the auditing session, but the pre-clear is taken to another person called an examiner. And he sits down in front of that person and picks up cans. And that examiner has an e-meter, and he makes sure that the person's needle is floating at the end of the session. If it's not floating, then there's an error in that, there's a screw up on that session, and they have to get the guy back in session in the next 24 hours to repair that. So that's what they'll be mindful of when they're running low on hours.
Well, I was going to say, if they run over, do they send the PC to the reg?
Oh, absolutely.
What if the PC doesn't want to pay and he got that extra free auditing?
Yeah, but generally speaking, what they will tend to do is they'll try very hard to not run over by not putting the person in session until they go buy another intensive.
Got it. They want to be prepared.
Absolutely.
All right.
Plus, remember, it's all about Benjamins. It's always about the Benjamins.
All right. That brings us to TR6 8C, which from what I gather is infinity control, because Hubbard loves the infinity sign, whether it's sideways or up.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes. Now I have to stop you because we're over, and I only have so much time I can give you today on this.
All right, we can pick this up on another day and finish off.
We can, because TR 6 through 9 is its own thing, and there's a lot to say about it. And I really want to give you a just, whatever
an analysis.
I want to give you a lot on that, right? I want to give you more than I think we have time for. So rather than start that whole thing, maybe this is a good place to.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, great.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for being on again. I can't wait to talk to you again soon and finish this section up. Everybody,
Absolutely.
like if you like the video, dislike if you don't, comment with your feedback or questions, good, bad, or sideways, and subscribe to be kept up to date on future content. Again, check out Chris's channel. Awesome stuff. All right. I'll see y'all later. Peace.
Bye-bye.